Hey everybody, we are looking today at a knife made by the current darlings of the knife community, the Chinese manufacturing sector. This is the Civivi knives Rustic Gent. Obviously been to the same school of naming as the Smith & Wesson fighting gun and the Ferrari speeding racer. Very sort of like a name that was written by a computer, the Rustic Gent. This is a gentleman's knife. What's a gentleman's knife? Well, it's a possibly hypothetical category of knife these days, aiming at having less features than a standard modern folding knife, harkening back to the days of what your grandpa used to carry. Dare say your grandpa probably didn't used to carry a Damasteel-esque carbon fibered bolstered, highly produced, fairly low cost Chinese knife, but there you go. This is definitely in the modern traditional styling, so you've got modern innovations like Damasteel-esque blade materials, G10, as I said, carbon fiber, high levels of machining tolerances, all those sorts of things. Sold with, it still bites. Sold with a slipcase here to make it even more rustic. What is more rustic than a leather slipcase?
But I do have slippers and an oatmeal spoon! Look!
So the Rustic Gent here, it's sent to me by Chris to try out. I purchased it off him because I quite like it. I like a lot of things about it and kind of fit an empty spot in my collection. As I said, gentleman's knife. Perhaps hypothetical, actual collection category. I don't really think I would differ my carry depending on where I was, unless you're really trying to get into character. If I was to go to a wedding, I'd probably still just take my TRM Atom, but there you go. People insist that, I've got a gentleman's knife, so now I can carry it to church, to funerals, to dinner engagements with my corporate bros. I don't know. Anyway, it's a nice thing to have an extra kind of knife, I think. So that's kind of what satisfies me. So, looking at this guy here, this is definitely on the smaller side. It's a 3-inch blade. I'll run it up next to some other knives now in what we like to call the size comparison portion. So in my testing of the Civivi Rustic Gent, I basically just carried it as my everyday carry knife for the better part of a couple of weeks, alternating between this and the Benchmade Freak, and then segueing into entirely this. And I quite enjoyed it. As a cutting knife, it is a performer. Very well ground blade, hollow ground, very thin behind the edge, very snaggy and bitey even now after all that use on things like cardboard and timber and food, and of course my twisted sisal rope cut tests. Cut my finger whilst filming, I guess I'll just run with it. So the steel here is Damasteel.
Substitute. We're giving it a try, and it's a bit of a disappointment, I'm afraid. In fact, it's no substitute at all. Polly, would you take the order again, please?
So Damasteel doesn't mean much to me, and my brain that needs to know everything doesn't love a few things about Damasteel. Regarding this section of the knife review, I don't really love that you don't quite know what's doing the cutting. So I'm going to estimate that this one is 9CR18 MOV, and that estimation is going to come from my rope cut test, which performed about as well as I've had 9CR18 MOV perform in the past. So if you think to my Spyderco mule testing, the 9CR18 MOV went just over 200 cuts on the twisted sisal rope with a 17-degree mirror polished angle. This guy did the same, 17-degree mirror polished angle cut, 210 times through the rope. That's a pretty good result for a non-powdered steel, like a pretty basic stainless low-cost steel. 9CR18 is probably one of the better low-cost stainless steels. So that is pretty impressive really for what you're paying for. And I'm going to further assume it's 9CR18 MOV because It's a commonly used Civivi steel. I'm pretty sure this is a stainless blade because it hasn't tarnished at all yet, despite me using it on lots of food. The other variant of this comes in D2 steel, and I reckon that sort of seems like it would be how it goes to me, having one in D2 and one in a stainless Damasteel style. That would make the most sense to me. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's 9CR18. It could still be a D2/15N20 type Damasteel or Damascus type steel. I don't know, but on this guy, it's going to perform pretty well for the price that you're paying. It's not going to match S110V or anything like that, because you know what? You pay at least 150 to 200 US dollars for a knife in S110V. This knife here cost about, I think in this pattern, I think it's 100 US dollars, which is probably a bit more than I'd even pay for it normally. I paid $80 to Chris because Chris is my friend and he sells me things for less than he should. So there we are. For $80, I'm pretty happy with it. For $100, I don't know. I'd say you're encroaching on perhaps just getting the Benchmade proper instead, or the Lion Steel collector knives. Knife, I'm not sure. I'll talk about some other parts of it, but still, sitting on this blade. Don't sit on the blade, but still staying on this blade portion. It is a particularly well-ground blade. It's probably the best ground of all the gentleman folders that I've carried and tried lately. So it's better ground than the Lion Steel collector knives. Lion Steel, it's got a proper, intense hollow grind there. It does really, really well on fruit, food, and whatnot. And I've got no doubt that it probably did aid it a whole lot in the rope cut test as well. It's got some good, solid geometries. Geos is the cool way of saying that. Save some time by shortening the words and explaining them afterwards. Doesn't save time. We are looking at, some nice cutting skills right there on this blade. The finger groove here, I guess, which is what you pull to get the knife out. Not super needed. You can grab any part of the blade and pull it out, and that's fine. But it looks kind of nice. It's nice and sort of symmetrical side by side. They do accumulate some crud in them though, so I've already had a bit of crud accumulate, and you get like your little tweezers and just glide it sort of out, and that's that. But I think it looks kind of nice and looks kind of, I don't know, classic, I guess. It's kind of what you're going for in these. Everything about the knife I think looks quite nice. Apart from something I'll get to in a second that is just purely opinionated. I think the G10 and the carbon fibre is a good match. I like how they've just gone two dark colours. It works well than having like a blue and then this sort of cloudy grey carbon fibre. I'm happy with that. The Damasteel blade. I'm going to deviate from what a lot of knife people seem to think. I'm going to say I don't think Damasteel looks good at all. I think Damasteel in general looks gaudy. It's like,
how wonderfully decadent, and just as I was beginning to lose interest.
How like people have overdone houses with doilies and gold curtain rods and purple drapes and velvet everywhere. To me, it's that kind of level of taste. And again, highly, this isn't based on nothing else but how I feel. I feel like a Damasteel blade on a knife, especially of this price, is like if a guy with a quite average body that probably wouldn't be able to do too much physical violence particularly well on someone. It'd be like me getting a tribal tattoo sleeve on my arm. It doesn't really make the arm work or act any better. It just kind of makes it look a bit more like, notice my arm? And that's kind of what I've always sort of felt about Damasteel. It's often a cash upgrade for a less defined steel in terms of what steel you're actually getting.
Soybeans and essence of cow.
And not particularly better cutting edge performance. The D2 version of this knife would probably cut for a longer time, and yet you're paying more for the Damasteel. So that's just my mix of very practical brain and highly, taste driven narrative, sort of throwing some weight behind maybe getting the D2 version if you like this knife. Of course, the D2 version won't resist rust probably as well as this Damasteel has for me so far. So there is also that. But I don't love how Damasteel looks. In fact, I think it's kind of tacky, even on really expensive knives. I don't know why people think it looks so good. I just don't. It's like you get those, Christmas light diarrhea looking knives from some people that's just got shit all over it, and it's just not me. I totally get I've got very good friends in the knife world that it is their thing. It is just not me. So for me, I would just get the D2 version. I think the blade will cut longer, better. Just put some, mineral oil or something on it from time to time, and you'll be right. So that's kind of my thoughts on the blade. In terms of the rest of the knife, it's so simple. It's actually, I've just been bleeding progressively as I do the video. How good am I? It's just been a really basic, simple knife that really has nothing negative particularly about it, to hold it, to use it, to lock it, to unlock it. It is what it is. It's a traditional knife, so it's not going to have the same super fun fidget factor. You're not going to be kind of clacking it open on the couch like, I don't know, like your Benchmade freak. You're not going to be all like, or anything like that. It's just pretty standard. It's a good, honest cutting tool. The sheath works pretty well. It's got like a nice deep carry clip on it. And it goes nicely into your pocket. The knife kind of pushes in and out slightly awkwardly, I must say. I reckon just chuck it in your pocket. But if you do actually want to keep it in the same pocket as your keys, then I guess this makes sense. I don't know. It kind of just seems to add an extra step for me. Because you do need to sort of twist and fidget your fingers in this to get it out perfectly. Maybe I'm just a bit more unco than you. Highly possible. But that's just how I sit on that. Don't hate it. Don't love it, but it's nice that it comes for the ticket price as well. So probably an extra $10 to $15 value for something like this. So hey, there you are. Overall, the lockup has been fine. The action is passable. I like the opening action. It feels about how it should. The closing action, and this is proper like knife nerd nitpicking. From here, I always think these knives should have a bit of a snap shut. Let's see the Buck 110. Kind of, once you push it past a certain point, the knife just kind of wants to close. Whereas this one doesn't have that. You can sort of push and it stops there. You can push it even a little bit further, stops there. You see what I mean? So that's just something about it. It's not like your traditional snappy walk and talk kind of knife. If you want something like that, then GEC will sell you something that's probably just as well. And that brings me towards my other thing, is the competitors for this knife. At this price point, the $100 price point, you're starting to get into Great Eastern Cutlery's good knife territory. So I would say if you want the experience of having one of these, I'd still probably get a GEC if you just want to have one. If you like these Civivi knives, then this one's well made. It's done pretty well. The steel's pretty good. The steel's probably actually a little bit better than you'll get from a GEC. I just kind of think that the GECs probably have what you're after if you're looking for something like this, and that is that
Hepbridge Farm remembers
that indescribable, proper vintage feeling knife, which is sort of what this might be lacking a little bit. It feels just a little bit soulless. This review has been full of shit that just is not quantifiable at all, and I'm sorry about that, but that's just another thing I'm going to drop, because I think it's the elephant in the room. A mass-produced sort of sheeny CF and G10 and Damasteel type traditional knife is not going to tickle a lot of people. This tickles me pretty well. I don't mind it because it's still a workable, practical tool, but it does sort of fob off a lot of what this subgenre of knives is all about. So just keep that in mind. It might not quite tickle that, even with its sort of vintagey leather case and all that sort of thing. So there you go. I like it. Totally get if you don't, because yeah, it's not quite ticking the less quantifiable or the more quantifiable boxes, but as a user, it slices really well. It probably slices better than most of the others. It's got good edge retention. It's very well made, very well put together. Just lacking in the nostalgia department, perhaps. Anyway, Civivi, Rustic Gent. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.